If you've never had it before, a good black and tan, aka half and half if you're from Ireland, is a great way to mix up your beer drinking experience. If you're not familiar, a half and half is a layered beer cocktail comprised of two different styles of beer. Typically a pale ale like a Bass and a stout like a Guinness. And they're layered on top of each other, and it makes this really cool combination, and it's just a great way to drink something other than just your straight typical beer. The idea of the half and half started way back in the 17th century when consumers had been mixing different styles of beers for a long time. And the reason they were doing that is because different beers and different alcohols at different levels of content were taxed differently. So higher alcohol content drinks were taxed higher than lower alcohol content drinks. So to save a little bit of money and to actually help turn a profit, consumers and brewers started mixing the two. So when you mix that high level, low level, you bring the taxes somewhere in the middle and you make a little bit more money. Now, real quick, the reason you shouldn't use the term black and tan when you're in Ireland or talking to somebody who's Irish is because it's actually considered fairly offensive. The reason being, back in the early 1900s, after the First World War, the British government hired a group of special forces to basically go in and crush the Irish Rebellion. Now, because of their uniforms and other things, they were called the Black and Tans. That wasn't their official name, that was the nickname. But they invaded Ireland and wreaked havoc and did all sorts of nasty things. So it's better to just use the term half and half rather than black and tan. If you're Irish, you already know that. If you're over there as a guest, use the term half and half. It'll keep you a little safer, I think. Now, when making the half and half, there's two important components of this. The first is what beers you're using. Not all pale ales are strong enough to hold up a stout, and not all stouts are light enough to stay on top of a pale ale. This is because beers have different densities. A good place to start is using Bass and Guinness. Those are the two traditional components of a half and half. Now, for whatever reason, Bass can sometimes be a little hard to find, so I went with hard lager, which is the traditional replacement for Bass if you can't find it, and it's a great choice. Now, when you're pouring the beers, this is the second important component. The first thing you want to do is you want to pour half the glass filled with the pale ale. Pale ale goes first. Okay? Make sure you fill it at least halfway and you give that glass some support there. The second part now, and the most important part of the pour, is how you're going to pour the Guinness or the stout that you choose to use. Now, it's important that you pour it gently and indirectly. So an easy way to do that is usually over a spoon. You take a tablespoon, turn it upside down, and gently pour it over the back. They also make specific black and tan or half and half spoons that have a little notch in the neck that just sits a little bit more easily on the glass. That's one way to do it. What I actually like is this tool here. This is just this silver plated gadget with some holes and rivets in it, and it's called the Perfect Black and Tan, and the reason is it makes your job a little bit easier. You just put it right on top of the glass and you pour that Guinness right over the metal plate in the middle, and it dissipates over to those holes. And the reason I really like this is because it doesn't require me to hold it the entire time. You know, I get shaky hands, especially after a few Guinnesses. And B, it helps regulate how much is going into the glass all at once. So I don't run the risk of pouring a little too fast and having it mix into that pale ale. Now, with that being said, if you do go ahead and pour a half and half and it does mix and blend together, it's not the end of the world. That's okay. Don't throw the beer out. It's not the look you're going for, but you're still going to get a pretty good flavor. It just takes some practice, especially if you're using the over the back of a spoon method. You have to learn how to pour it a little bit slower to get the look we're going for. But there are some breweries in the US that make pre-mixed black and tans. Yuengling here in Pennsylvania makes the Yuengling Original Black and Tan, a pre-mixed bottled black and tan. So it's quite all right to do that. The cool part about half and halves is you can experiment. You can use different types of pale ales or lagers and different types of stouts. It doesn't have to be Guinness, it doesn't have to be hard. These are just good starting points. But I've seen it go to Hogarten and Murphy's. I've seen Left Hand Milk Stout mixed with, I forget what the pale ale in that one was, but I've seen varying combinations, and it's something you should try and experiment with. So when you do try these, or if you are a seasoned fan of half and halves, in the comments, I'd love to hear what some of your favorite recipes are and what you've come up with, because there's definitely combinations out there that people haven't heard of, haven't tried, so I'd love to hear what your favorites are. But go ahead and experiment. Make yourself this really cool drink, and you're probably going to like the flavor. You may not love Irish stouts, you may not love pale ales, but the combination gives you this great blend somewhere in the middle that I think is definitely worth the try. So, I hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for other beer cocktails that we'll do later, but I hope you enjoyed this little lesson on half and halves, not black and tans, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Cheers.